Hi everybody, this is Tim with Fitzco Education, and today we're here to do a step-by-step build of the TETRIX Max Ranger Bot. And from here on out I'll probably call it Ranger Max, but just so you'll know, we're going to divide this build up into 4 different sections. I'm going to start by building the base, and I've got the parts we need for that here. We're going to then add the mounting deck, so we can go from there, and then on top of that we're going to go ahead and put the wheels, and then finally we're going to do the control systems. So we've got all the pieces that we need to do the base in front of me. I've got 4 pieces of the 288mm channel. I've got 8 of the socket cap screws. I've got 8 of my cap nuts, and then I've got the tools that I'm going to use as well. As we get ready to do this, I want to talk to you just a minute about a couple of things that might make this a little easier and kind of explain what we've done here. The C channel, as you can see, is got 3 sides, and it's always the strongest in the direction of the open side. But that's not always the easiest way to build. So what we've done here is to make sure that we've got these oriented in the access point so it's easiest to access. So as you can see, I'm going to kind of set these basically like they're going to go. But essentially what I want you to remember is we're going to create a symmetrical frame. So I'm going to put these on one side at a time. We're going to locate them actually about 4 of the big holes back. And I'm going to, as you notice, I've got my hands where I can actually reach underneath the channel and place these nuts. Now there's 2 ways to do this. You can do it with the nut on your finger if that's easier, or you can actually use the wrench that we've got, and you can put that little nut in the wrench, and you can see it makes a really good way to hold that in place while you go ahead and screw it in. So, but for me, because I'm just used to it, I'm going to do this by hand. I'm going to place the nut underneath the channel. And as you can see, I'm going to kind of make sure that I've got it in the right place. I'm going to count 4 holes back, and I'm going to locate that, and I'm going to take my first socket head cap screw. I'm going to locate it down like that. Take my hex wrench, reach down, and you can see as I get that in the right place. There we go, I had it off. I'm just going to snug that down. Now another thing I want to make sure that you understand is you never really, when you're building this frame, you never want to really tighten all the way until you get everything in place. So we're going to loosely put the 8 screws in place. Then we're going to go back after we make sure we have everything square the way we want it, and we're going to tighten it up. So I'm going to go ahead and put the second one on this side. Again, not really tight yet. I'm going to come over here on this side and do the same thing again, because we're creating this symmetrical frame. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to start. I'm going to count my holes and make sure that I get 4 up. Switch hands here. Now, the reason why you want to actually go ahead and make sure that you snug after you put everything down, you can see that there's a little bit of wiggle in that as it is moving, because of the tolerance that the hole has to have for the screw to go through easily. So you want to make sure that that is kind of square before you finally tighten everything down. Now a cap nut is designed so that you really shouldn't need to put a wrench on that. But you do have the wrench in the kit that if you need to, you can go ahead and use that to help hold that nut in place when you tighten it down. And again, you've got 2 different style wrenches. You have this one that's a little bit easier to use for me as I stick it through the channel, but you also have a traditional Allen key that if you really wanted to tighten those nuts down, we could put that in just like that and actually get more leverage to tighten that down even tighter. But once we've got that done, we've got step 1 done, we're ready to go on step 2. Okay, so we've got step one, we've got our base, and now we're going to add basically a mounting surface to the base so we can actually put our control system on that. So this is going to be step number 2. I've got my pieces pulled that I'm going to need for that. I got 2 of my flat building plates. I've got my 2 of my angle brackets, 4 of my standoffs, 32 millimeter. I've got my switch mounting plate, my switch. I've got 2 different sizes of my socket head cap screws because I'm going to use them in 2 basic different applications. I've got 4 of my 1/2 inch, and I've got 16 of my 5/16 length socket head cap screws, and I also have 16 of my cap nuts. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and manipulate this around a little bit so that it's easier for me to access. I'm going to rotate my base just like that. I'm going to take one of my angle plates. And if you see here I'm going to move this around just on the bottom side so I can kind of access that through. I'm going to go ahead and take one of my short socket head cap screws. I'm going to hold this up just a little bit because it's going to be a little bit easier for you to see. And I'm going to hold that with the bottom of my hand. I'm going to take one of my cap nuts and I'm going to put that on the back. I'm going to take my hex tool and I'm going to go ahead and just again snug that down. I don't want to get it real tight yet. Take the second one and I'm going to do the same thing again with my cap nut on the back. Now I'm going to take my second angle bracket. I'm going to mount it just on the other side because I'm creating a surface for my mounting switch, my on-off switch. So taking the cap nut and one of the shorter socket head cap screws, putting that through. Once you get the first one in place, it's a little bit easier to go ahead and put the second one in because you don't have to hold things quite with one hand. Now again, I'm not going to tighten those down yet because I'm going to add my switch on top of that. You can see I've added my angle brackets. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my mounting switch on top of that. I'm going to use the longer socketed cap screws for this because I've got the extra thickness of that acrylic plate. So I'm going to snug this down in a specific order. I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to start by tightening these first before I tighten these. And the reason is as I tighten these down, that's going to make these 2 angle plates parallel and make sure that they're in the right position so that when I tighten them on this side, they're going to go ahead and make sure everything is in the position that they need to be. Once I have that done, I can actually take my on-off switch and you can see that it'll go ahead and pop right down in. Now it really doesn't matter which way that you put that in, either way is fine, but you're just going to snap that in place. Now once I've done that, I'm going to set this aside just for a moment and I'm going to actually add some components to my building plates before then I put them on top of this because I'm going to switch this over. So I'm going to take my building plates and I'm going to add 4 of my standoffs, 2 to each side, keeping in mind, remember that we're going to make this symmetrical, so each building plate will actually be a mirror for the other one. So I'm going to add 2 of my standoffs to each side of my building plate. And I'm going to go the second hole back on this side, and these are pretty easy to put in. You can actually just start by holding that with your finger with the smaller of the socket head cap screws. Just go in right like that. And 1 hole over. Now I can go ahead and snug those down, and I can do that by actually using the smaller of my wrenches. It'll fit that standoff, and then I can take my hex tool and tighten that up. Now again, I'm going to make mirrors, so once I've got one side, I'm going to do the same thing with the other plate, only on the opposite side. So take my socket head cap screw and add 2 standoffs on this side. Now once I've got those snug and in place, I'm ready to actually add these plates to the bottom of my base. So I'm going to take my base, I'm going to turn it over, and I am going to add these plates just like this. And again, make sure, watch where I'm putting those standoffs, because again, we are creating that mirror situation because we're building symmetrical. And I'm going to start on one side, and I'm going to put, again with my shorter socket head cap screws, holding my cap nuts. And again, this is where you'll see how easy it is to access these if I've got these channels pointed in the right direction. Remember, what do we say? We're not going to tighten everything down until we get it in place, because we want to make sure everything is fitting and is square. So I've got one side, let's do the other. Now, one thing you want to remember is we are putting these in loose, but you don't want to forget that we do have to go back once we've got them in place, and we have to tighten everything down. Otherwise, you'll have bolts and nuts fall off after your build is done. One last one. Okay, now I can go back and tighten everything down. Okay, as you can see, we finished with step 2, and now we're getting ready to go to step 3, where we're going to add the wheels on the bottom. So I've got everything pulled for step 3. I've got 2 of my 4-inch Omni wheels. I've got 2 of the 32mm channel brackets. I've got 2 of the standard 4-inch TETRIX Max wheels. I've got 2 of the 12-volt DC motors. I've got 2 of the mounts for those. I've got 2 of the motor shaft hubs that go on the motors. I've got 4 of the axle shaft hubs that's going to help hold on the Omni wheels, 2 of the 100mm steel axles, 4 of the nylon bushing spacers. I've got this time 3 different sizes of the socket head cap screws. I've got the 5/16, I've got the 1/2 inch, and then I've got the 1.5 inch length socket head cap screws. And then I've got 4 of the bronze bushings. That should be everything, along with my tools, which I've got an extra piece of 32mm channel that I'm going to use as a tool. It's not going to go on the bot, but I'll show you how that works as we go through. So with step 3, again, I'm going to move my base around a little bit to help manipulate it, but I'm going to start on my far end, and I'm going to put my mounts, my 32mm channel, on my actual base for the mount of my actual Omni wheel. So I'm going to start by, again, using my short, or the 5/16 socket head cap screws, and I'm going to mount 2 of those channels, 1 on each side. Again, remember, we're going to build symmetrically, so I'm just going to go ahead and again put that down. Now we can go ahead and again snug this down if we make sure that this 32mm channel is flush with this longer channel. And this is why it's important as we build this frame that we want to make sure everything is square, because if it's not square all the way, then our wheels are going to actually have bits of angle to the way they're set, and our robot's not going to drive straight. So if we have the long piece of channel straight, then our short one should be straight as well. So I'm going to add my second piece of channel on this side. Again, using my last of my shorter socket head cap screws. Make sure my small piece of channel lines up with my big one, and actually go ahead and snug that down. Once I have the 2 pieces of channel in place, I'm ready to go ahead and put on my Omni wheels. So I'm going to start with my bronze bushings. I'll do one side at a time. Bronze bushings are going to go in and provide a bearing surface for our axle. I'm going to go ahead and take a 100mm axle, and on top of that, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I put one of the nylon bushings, and then I can take my Omni wheel. Now you can see my Omni wheels are already assembled. If you need help assembling these, there is help in the builder's guide to actually show how to assemble these. The main thing to remember is that we want those rollers, since we're using these in tandem as a dual, we want those rollers to be offset. If they're not again, make sure you go back to your builder's guide and evaluate how you've got that put together. But once we have one Omni wheel in, we can put that on the outside. And we're going to make sure we take our axle hubs. Now, you could also use our set collars for this, but for me, the axle hubs are a little bit bigger. And in this application, because we're not using them somewhere else, we can actually use them as set collars. So place that on the D-shaped axle. I'm going to take my, again, appropriate size hex wrench. I'm going to tighten that down. Put one on the opposite side, again, to hold that in place. And I'm going to tighten that down. And I'm ready to go to my other side. Now again, so there we've got our Omni wheels in place. We're ready to go ahead and go to our motor mounts. So now we're ready to go ahead and add our motor mounts. So we're going to mount those. We've got our Omni wheels on one side of the build. So now we're going to put our drive motors and our actual 4-inch wheels on the opposite side. So you'll notice the motor mounts have actually two different sizes. They're going to use the longer 1.5-inch bolts, but we're going to go ahead and start by putting those on the opposite end. And we just want to kind of center them up in the channel. And again, I put them in place like that, and I can take my cap nuts and my wrench. And again, there's two different sizes here, so I can start by putting the solid side down first. And on this other side, I want to just go ahead and put the cap nut on, but I do not want to tighten it down at all, because as I tighten this side down, it's going to squeeze that together, which is going to make that clamp down on the motor. And we don't want to clamp that down until we actually get our motor mounted. So I'm going to snug this side down, make sure my motor mount is parallel along the center of my channel. And I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. Now, once I have my motor mounts in place, I'm ready to go ahead and put my actual DC motors in place. So I'm going to start again on my left, your right, and I'm going to just simply slide that in. Now you can see that there's some play there as far as where it goes, and you'll also notice that rotates. And if you look at that motor, you'll see that shaft is not in the center of the motor, it's offset. So this is going to be important, and this is why I have this extra piece of channel here as kind of a tool. If you notice that when we mounted this, I'm going to turn this sideways so you can see it. When we used the 32mm channel and mounted the Omni wheel, that it's in the center, because we're going through the center of this channel, of this small piece of channel. But as I rotate that shaft of that motor around, you'll see that it actually moves in a little bit of an ellipse. And if what I need to do is make sure that this shaft is parallel to this wheel down here. Otherwise, my robot will not set level. So I want to make sure that I move that, and I'm going to just, again, turn this around so I can look at it real quick. And make sure that shaft is in more or less the center of where that 32mm channel would be. Again, and that's why I kind of use that as a spacing tool. And then once I have it in place, then I can go ahead and take my tool and I can tighten down this side. Because once I tighten this down, I shouldn't be able to rotate that motor. That's going to lock that in place. So we're going to do that on this other side the same way. Rotate my motor in the right place, and then I'm going to snug that down.
Alright, now that we've got our motors mounted up, we need to go ahead and put the motor shaft hubs on the motor so that we can mount our wheels. So before we do that, I want to make sure that we recognize what the motor shaft hub looks like, because it's very similar to the axle hub. The difference is the interior dimension, or the interior size of that hole. The motor shaft hub is the only one that will go onto the motor, so that you need to know that. The other thing to make sure of is that we've got this raised lip that needs to be pointed out away from the motor so that the wheel will set on that. So I'm going to go ahead and start here on my left, your right, and I'm going to mount my hub, and we'll tighten that down. And make sure that's fairly snug, because you don't want that slipping off. Once we get that mounted, we can take our wheel and it will just seat down on the hub itself. I'm going to set this up like this so I can see, and I'm going to put those bolts in. Again, I'm going to turn this so I can see just for a moment, turn it back so you can see, just like that. Take my wrench, put this down, and this is just like putting on a tire on your car. You don't want to snug any one side down too tight. You want to do this so that you get an even fit across the wheel, because if you tighten down one too quick or too hard before you put the others in, the wheel will be potentially wobbly and not on the hub straight. So putting all 4 of these in, and once I have them down, I'm going to begin to kind of snug them up opposite. Not real tight all at once, but just kind of making sure I've got an even fit. Once I've got it snug, then I can go back, kind of tighten each one down. There we go. We've got the left side on. Now what we've got that side on, we're going to go back and do the exact same thing on the right. Once I've got that on, I can take it back like this. I can rotate that wheel, spin it, and I can watch and make sure that it's running in a smooth motion and not wobbling. So I've got my wheels on, I'm ready to go on to the next step.
Okay, we just finished with step 3 and we're ready for the last and final step, step 4. As you can see, I've turned my robot over so that it's on my wheels. And as you can see, if I've done this correctly and I've rotated my motor shaft correctly, this surface on top, the building surface, should be level, and that's what we want. So I'm going to start and turn that back like this, getting ready to go. And now I've pulled everything else that I need for this shot, actual last step together, so that we've got everything ready to go. I've got my Sabertooth RC controller. I've got my battery mounting clips. I've got the 2 mounting bases for the wireless receiver and the Sabertooth. I've got the motor leads. I've got the wiring for the on-off switch. I've got my wireless receiver for my gamepad. And then last but not least, I've got my mounting hardware. I've got 4 of the 5/16 socket head cap screws. I've got 8 of the 1/2-inch socket head cap screws. And then I've got the 8 of the cap nuts. And last but not least, 4 of the nylon spacers. So I'm going to deviate just a little bit from the building steps, because there are a couple ways to mount this Sabertooth controller. And I want to show you the one that's a little bit more involved, so that in case you decide to do this, you can. And I'm going to start by mounting the Sabertooth controller on my mounting deck before I put it on the base of my robot. The Sabertooth controller comes with the appropriate mounting hardware. It comes with 4 of the Phillips head screws and the nuts for those. So I'm going to go ahead and actually do that with the head of my screw at the bottom of the base. So that's going to be important because of spacing. So I'm going to start with that. Once I have those kind of finger tight, I can actually take my 4-in-1 screwdriver that I have with my set, and I can actually take the Phillips head portion of that and snug that down. Again, these don't have to be real tight because it's an electronic piece. There's no stress on it. So you just want to go ahead and snug that down. So now we're ready to go ahead and mount the Sabertooth controller mounting deck to the actual surface of the base. But I need to make sure that we understand, because of these bolts sticking through, we no longer have a flat surface. So we're going to need something that holds this up off the surface enough that we can actually tighten it down. That's where the nylon spacers are going to come in place. So I'm going to tilt this up so that we can see it. The board will actually go right in here like this, if you can see that. So I need to go ahead and place my nylon spacers, and I have to put this back down because they will slide off on my bot, just like this ahead of time. And you can see that where I'm putting them, just like that. And if I go ahead and kind of carefully set my board on top of that, then I can take my 1/2-inch socket head cap screws Put those through. Now I can take my cap nuts, my sockets, my wrench, and I can just snug those down. Reaching from underneath on each side. One of the things that I try and do as I build is to always remember that if I can, it's easy to for the bolts to hold themselves in place if I've placed them vertically, so that gravity kind of helps me hold things in place. If I was working on an angle like this, bolts, things can fall off. So the only thing I really have to worry about holding is the nut on the bottom. So again, once I kind of get everything in place, snug again down. Remember, we're using acrylic plastic, so I don't have to get real tight with that. Now, obviously, we've got a mounting piece for our receiver. We're going to go ahead and we'll do that at the same time just to make sure. Now, I can go ahead and mount this to the side right here. But because I don't have any bolts holding the receiver down, I can just mount that flush. I will put that right there. Again, 4 of our 1/2-inch socket head cap screws through just like this. Now you're probably wondering, could we just go ahead and Velcro that receiver to the aluminum? We could, but this actually gives you a little bit more mounting options, so we include it. Because we've included it, we're going to go ahead and use it. Now the mounting deck comes with some Velcro dots, and you can see that all you have to do once you've applied your Velcro, put that in place, and your mounting electronic control hardware is in place. Now before we go any further and add anything else on the top, while we got access to everything, we want to go ahead and wire our bus on this side while we still have really good access to it. So I'm going to start with the on and off power switch. Now this is going to be very important, and I want to make sure that if you don't pay attention to anything else, you pay attention to this, because you can damage this board if you don't do this correctly. The center bus right here at the bottom is where the battery power goes into the Sabertooth controller. And if you look, there's a B plus and a B minus. You want to make sure it's very, very important. So this is really, you want to pay attention to this when you put this in. The positive side of the battery needs to go in B plus, the negative into the B minus. So for us, that's red and black. Red being positive, black being negative. So it's very important that we get the black wire into, as the negative side, we want to get the black wire into the B minus, and you can see that right there. So I'm going to very carefully insert that, and I'm going to take my screwdriver, flat bladed screwdriver, and I'm going to tighten that middle one down. That's the negative side of the battery. Then I'm going to take my secondary red wire, which is going to interrupt to my switch, that's the positive side. The red side is going to go into the B plus. So you can see I put the red in right like that, and then carefully tighten that down as well. Now once I have that done, I'm actually going to flip this back over so we can see what I'm doing, because I'm going to then actually wire up my switch. This goes to my battery, so that's going to be good there, but I need to take the 2 connectors and actually plug them into the one each side of the switch. It does not matter which side that you go onto, but you want to go ahead and put both of those clip connectors right onto the back of the switch. Once you've done that, you've got the power connection ready to go to your robot. You can stick that back up through the top, because it's going to be where our battery plugs into. So that part is done. Now we're ready to go ahead and put the motor leads on. The motor leads are going to go onto each end of the motor. It's a simple clip-on cap, just like this on either side. Now the other thing that you can do, you don't have to, but it's kind of good maintenance, is to create a strain relief. Now you can see I'm holding this wire back along the side of the motor. Sometimes what I do, I don't always do it, but it's something good to remember, is that if you take a cable tie and actually wrap that around that wire, then if anything pulls on the wire out here like this, you're pulling against the cable tie, you're not pulling that cap off. That's just a good protective measure. Once we've done that, we're going to feed these actually up through the center of our base. We're going to turn our robot back over, just like this. Make sure our battery plug is out of the way. I'll put that down just for a minute. And again, for me, it's kind of easiest if I do left side, right side. So if I've got my wire from my left side of my my robot, I'm going to again go to the right and left side. Now, this is not as important as the center power connection. You can actually reverse the direction of the motors by changing the direction of these wires, but it's also kind of easy for you to keep in mind if you kind of maintain a little bit of the consistency the way you've already created. So for me, I go ahead usually and do positive on the left, negative on the right. So I'm going to go ahead and fasten the left side of my left motor, and again I'm making sure that I've got my red on the left, my black on the right, kind of like I do for my power. I'm going to go ahead and tighten those down with my 4-in-1 screwdriver. Once I have that done, I can go ahead and attach my right side motor. Sticking this up through bottom there. Now, before I attach this, let's think about this just for a minute, because we have to recognize that I've got 2 motors mounted on my robot. I'll set this like this just for a moment. And as I have them mounted, they're in opposition. They're pointed in opposite directions. So if I want these to work together and actually make my robot drive forward or backwards and have them with one command do that, I need to have the polarity of these motors going opposite. So when this one is going clockwise, this one's going counterclockwise. I can do that with my power lead. So again, I want to make sure for this motor I've got my red on the right, black on the left, opposite of the side over here. Snug this up just a little bit. So not just snug, we want to make sure that that's tight. The last thing that we need to actually go ahead and connect is we've got power coming into our saber tooth controller. We need to actually then output that to our wireless receiver so that the receiver can get signals from our gamepad, send that to the saber tooth controller, which then will control our wheels. So I've got 2 channels coming in from my saber tooth, and I'm going to, it really makes a little bit of difference depending on how you want to set up the gamepad for each individual person as far as which axis is appropriate for how you particularly like to control your robot. So that's going to impact which one of these plugs goes into which channel of the receiver. But the important thing to remember is the colors, okay? The brown is the negative, and the red is the power, and the orange is the signal. And if you look on the controller, the wireless controller, we have negative, positive. I'm going to hold this up so you can see it. Now it's upside down. I'm going to turn this around just so you can see it, just like this. You can see that we have the coding here. I've got my signal wire, positive and negative. So the red wire is going to go in the middle. The brown dark wire is going to go on the outside, and the signal wire is on the inside. So whichever channel I decide to put that in, I'm going to plug that in just like that. Again, see the color of the wires. And we'll just do this like 2 and 4. And again, depending on how you personally like to use a gamepad, that might vary a little bit. Once we have that, we're ready for the last and final step to mount our battery clips. I'm going to put that like this. I've got 2 battery clips. I'm going to mount those just like at the bottom, or at the top like that. Use the last of my 4 my 5/16 socket head screws. Again, this is pretty basic. It's the same on both sides. Creating that mirror image, left to right. There again, mirror of each other. And we are officially finished. The only thing we have left to do is go get our battery, which should be charging by while we're doing this, and then put this on our robot, connect the battery connection, and we're ready to drive. All right, so I've gone and I've picked up my battery that's been charging. I'm ready to go ahead and wrap this all up and make sure that everything is working. So I'm going to go ahead and make my connection, battery connection. There's only one way that that plug is going to go on, so that's the important thing to remember. I'm going to put this kind of down out of the way. Battery's going to fit in there nice and snug, so you can see it's not going to go anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I've got power. I'm going to turn on my switch, and you can see if you look at my wireless connector, wireless receiver, I've got a little flashing red light. I also have a green light on my saber-tooth receiver, so my motor controller, so that's good. If I get to my gamepad and I power it on, you can see if I've got it paired that now that flashing red light, I'll put this down just for a minute and hold it so you can see it. Flashing red light is now a solid red light. That means I have a connection, and depending on how I have my channel set up here, I should have power to my wheel. So I'm going to hold this up, make sure my robot doesn't run away from me. And as you can see, when I push that forward, if I'm thinking this is the front, my robot is going to move to the front. If I pull it back this way, it's going to come back toward me. And if I go ahead and hit my, move this out of the way just for a moment so that I can actually run my robot on the table. See if I can do this without running it off the table. If I put my stick that way, my robot will turn in that direction, and in that direction my robot turns that way. So I'm ready to go drive. So we're done with that. That's great. Ready to have fun now. But before I go with that, I want to make sure that everybody knows that if you go to TETRIXrobotics.com or Pitsco.com, look for Ranger Max, and you should be able to find extra resources and activities. So thanks for joining me today. Hope you can have fun with this build and enjoy some of the connections that you can make of building robots. So come back and see us.